We're talking about golf. We're going to talk about sports. I'm so delighted to have both of you here because you are at the white-hot center of something we all care deeply about, which is the world of sports. I want to start with golf. You guys are both part of the Strategic Sports Group, which made a big investment in the PGA. And I want to put up a couple slides that, Tom, you were nice enough to share with me that talk about the growth of the game and the opportunity that presents itself in golf. If we can get those slides somewhere. Okay, it's really big. There we go. So there's U.S. I mean, these are staggering numbers, and I think maybe I certainly, when I looked at them when you sent them to me, I was surprised at how big these numbers are. Can we go to the next one because it gives the...
I just want to say one thing.
Okay, please.
The first slide is about the popularity of golf in the United States. Part of what made us all excited about it is that this is really a global sport. So, when you think about the $102 billion spent in golf, that's in the United States, and of course there's a bigger number worldwide.
Yeah. So let's look at the global numbers, because it does feel like that's at the core of this business case. So that if we go to the next slide about the global, I mean, that is a staggering number, almost 400 million people. So, Mark, I want to start with you. Why do this deal? I mean, obviously the numbers pencil out, but golf, if you look at it, if anyone follows the headlines, not exactly, it's not a mess. When it comes to a business. Is that part of the attraction?
Well, it starts with the macro and the brand.
Yeah.
And I was sitting, I'm on a committee with John, actually a couple of committees with John and Tom at Major League Baseball, John Henry. And they were talking about the opportunity here, but I didn't realize that what they were working on. They just talked about some of the challenges that were being faced. And I said to John, well, to me, given that brand, the more challenges, the more opportunity.
Right.
33 years of investing at Crescent, that's what we found. You know, the easy investments don't really create a lot of opportunity. The more difficult ones do. So Tom and John called me a few days later and said, were you really serious in how you looked at that? And would you invest in the PGA? And 100%, of course. And I still didn't know what they were working on. And then they let me under the tent, and it's extremely exciting.
And so, Tom, what was it for you? I mean, your Fenway Sports Group, obviously the Red Sox, Liverpool, Pittsburgh Penguins, NESN, the Sports Network, and more. What was it about golf that jumped out to you?
Well, as most of you know, the structure of golf a couple of years ago was that it was a nonprofit, and the players were independent contractors. And so this now is a league that the players are now owners. They have equity in the league, and this SSG and Fenway Sports Group are really investing in the commercial growth of the game. And of course, it all starts with, what can create a better fan experience. And we are grateful that we were selected because it was a very competitive situation to invest in the new structure. But, we think that, and Mark is part of this group, that the operational experience that we have in sports can benefit the players and be a resource.
And so take us inside this proverbial tent a little bit. Like, what do you need to do? Like, what's the low-hanging fruit here? And what are the things you're seeing that can be relatively easily fixed or changed to improve those elements?
Well, one thing that Jay Monahan, who we think is a very strong leader, is doing is we are commencing a very extensive research study that is called Fan Forward. But Rob Manfred did the same thing in, I think, 2019, where he did a survey about what was good about baseball, how to make the experience better. And, a lot of positive changes have come from that. But we're going to be listening to our fans. And, just one idea that we've been talking about is when you think about the experience of going to an event on the tour, that we are trying to eventize it and make it really more must-see. And somebody at the PGA was looking at Louisville. You know, they have an event every year that is really just 2 minutes long in its actual composition of the Kentucky Derby. But around it, they have a week-long festival. So one of the things that we're talking about is how to create experiences at PGA Tour events that will make them more attractive.
And so, Mark, as you look at this, you're a global investor. Obviously, one of the elements that is clearly at play here is LIV. What needs to happen?
Well, if you look at the golfers, whether they're at LIV or PGA, these are some of the best athletes in the world. And across all sports, you want to see the best athletes competing against each other. That's why, for example, you have so much interest in the Olympics. And so we hope to be a bridge or a catalyst to try to bring the golfers back together so they could compete more than just a handful of times each year.
What's your level of confidence at this moment that that'll happen?
Well, look, we're all optimistic, right? We know so we know how difficult it is and what the hurdles are, including some regulatory ones.
Yeah.
But it really should happen, and so I think it will.
And so, Tom, when you think about, one of the things that's very compelling about sort of the data underneath this is this notion of sort of off course. Many of us in this room, for better or worse, go out and hack it around the 9 or 18 holes, but increasingly more people, especially younger people, are experiencing golf in different ways. How do you, through the PGA, monetize? I mean, how do you take advantage of that movement toward the top golfs and the sims and whatnot?
Well, the first thing is to acknowledge that one factoid, I think it was up there, is that more people were playing off-course golf in 2023 than on-course. So they're both growing, but off-course golf, things like Top Golf, is very attractive. So, it is all about the popularity of the game. One of the great things about golf, as opposed to the NFL, for example, which, has its own great attributes, is that people are playing it, and so when they're watching golf, they are participants in the sport. So, whether they play golf at their country club or they're playing mini golf, at their local hangout, it's all good for the game.
And that's, 5-year-olds can play. Our Hall of Fame announcer, Bob Uecker, turned 90. He still plays golf.
Right.
Pretty well, actually.
Right.
And
what about both of you? I mean, Tom, obviously your experience and success in the media world is very well known. You have created, many beloved shows, or still creating beloved shows on multiple platforms. What's the media side of golf? And then I want to talk about some other sports. But what's the media play here for you?
Well, I think we focus too much on Nielsen ratings, even though they're obviously very important. But the platforms that golf is on, the social media, it's growing exponentially on social media, and it's all about how to communicate the game to the consumer in a variety of ways.
And so what's the non-obvious, Mark, last golf question for now, what's the non-obvious thing that could help golf in your mind? What's the surprise, as you got into it and said, this is a nonprofit, they're doing this, they're doing that, what was the thing where you're like, oh, well, just do this, or that it surprises me that this is going on here?
Well, I think the best athletes in the world want to compete against each other.
Yeah.
And so underlying, however we got to where we are now, you would think they'd want to be able to go head to head. And I'm hoping that undercurrent will prevail.
So let's talk a little baseball, if we can. Both of you are owners of Major League Baseball teams. And when you think about this, we were talking a little bit about this backstage. Tom, this was a sport, baseball. I grew up watching it. I'm sure many people in this audience did, and folks watching this. And yet it seemed to be running into a little bit of trouble over the last couple of years. competition committee, gets together and makes some real changes. It feels like it's made a difference. Tell us what it looks like from your perspective when you actually get down to the numbers.
Well, we know it's made a difference because the fans have told us that one of the most important changes, and Mark and I are very supportive of all these changes, is that the game was too long. We all knew that. It was over 3 hours in length for a nine-inning game, and the pitch clock really has transformed the game. Now the game averages about 2 hours and 35 minutes per game, and so people were not leaving in the 6th or 7th inning. But that's just part of an initiative to make changes. The NFL makes changes every year, and nobody notices it, and every change in baseball is scrutinized. But along with the pitch clock, we've made some other changes. We now have rules about defensive alignment, which allow more balls to be in play. The size of each base is larger, which encourages stealing. And so there are rules that have already been implemented. And last year, again, another factoid is over 70 million people came to Major League Baseball games, which dwarfs the combined attendance of the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL. So we could do probably a better job touting that, but people are going to baseball games.
The minor leagues, the most watched sport live in the country is Major League Baseball. The second most watched sport is minor league baseball. So, the game, and I think a lot of the demographics don't get picked up. You have increasing interest from Latin American community, for example, and it's not clear that all of that younger demographic interest is picked up in the numbers. So, look, there's nothing more riveting than the ninth inning of a baseball game.
Right.
And to Tom's point on the some of the changes, the pace of game, the action. So 2 years ago, you'd have the shortstop in short right field almost like a softball player, and the ball would go right to them. Now you've got second baseman diving and making plays. There's a lot more action and a lot more, for the fans to engage with.
One of the underlying themes of both of your investments, and the golf thing fits into this too, is this sort of global view. Mark, you more recently have gotten into the world of football, soccer. Tom, you've been there, via Liverpool. What is it that you take from that experience and you apply back to, some of your U.S. Side investments? Tom, I'll start with you. Like, what have you picked up from Liverpool? You're like, okay, we need to do that either from a management perspective or an organizational perspective.
Well, the Premier League, and Mark is involved in English football too, is a very popular sport globally. Sometimes we have that narrow focus of the United States, but we are very pleased to be in the Premier League, and many more people watch a Manchester United-Liverpool match than the Super Bowl. So we're aware of that, and part of what we bring to all of our investments is relationships with sponsors because they fuel our growth. Part of our operational expertise is the relationships we have in Liverpool, for example, with UPS, Google. This week we announced a new partnership with Japan Airlines. So, we are excited to be in the Premier League.
So, Mark, you looking at that saying, I'm sorry, did you say relegation? Like, what
Yeah.
Promotion, relegation, what?
Well, what created the opportunity for us was relegation. Norwich City Canaries were relegated from the Premier League to the Championship League, and that's what created, out of adversity comes opportunity.
Yeah.
And what I've taken from it is this team, this club has been in existence over 100 years. They have the oldest fight song in English football. And what struck me, I really knew very little about football or soccer. I was somewhat the Ted Lasso of owners, was that the fans were called supporters. And the way you engage with your supporters is meaningful in such a way that almost when you're born in Norfolk County east of the UK, you start wearing yellow and green. So we've looked how to take that sort of feeling and bring it to Milwaukee, where we have a natural, fan base that grew up with the Milwaukee Brewers, and we've learned a lot of lessons from that.
And so as you look across, we just have a couple minutes left, but so as you look across the sports opportunity landscape, you do this golf deal, it's, $3 billion. The amount of money that is pouring into sports is breathtaking, and I sat on this stage earlier with Josh Harris and talked about that. Do you worry about sort of the cost and the valuations getting so high, Tom? Like, what do you look at? You guys have been doing this for a long time now.
Well, I look at it differently. I think that, and Mark would agree, that as an asset class, investing in sports has been demonstrated to be very attractive to investors, and more people are investing in sports as an asset. We are in partnership with Redbird Capital. We're in partnership with Arctos, that has a fund that invests in multiple teams in major sports. So the fact is that sports as a part of life is immensely important, and it's one of the things that brings people together. And obviously there's revenue implications for that. And the live event business is booming. So I'm very optimistic about the future of sports and the future of teams in a world in which there's obviously scarcity value.
So, Mark, anything that you're like, nah, I'm not going to, I'm good for now when it comes to sports, or something that you want to get into that you haven't yet?
Well, to the point on some of this, 20-plus years ago when I bought the Brewers, I knew in fact, my wife came into the study one day, my wife Debbie, and said, "You're not going to lose all our money, are you?" And so I had the Bank of America did a study back 20 years ago that showed it was a non-correlated asset class that didn't, would be somewhat recession resistant, which sort of is. We found in COVID that, that might be different for what's a live event business. But, so look, we're looking at everything from women's volleyball to professional sailing and other leagues to invest in. But, I think at some point there'll be differentiation. There's some sports that don't make sense to me. What's probably the greatest opportunity, is not just clear what the lane will be, is college sports.
Yeah.
And enormous revenue opportunities, and that they're not organized yet. They're getting organized to take advantage of it. So we've made a toehold investment in a company that's involved with the Big 12, and we'll see.
So, Tom, we'll sort of wrap where we started with golf, this big opportunity. What does success look like for you? As you sort of embarked on this, you put together this pretty incredible roster of investors. A year from now, 2 years from now, what does success look and feel like?
Well, we're patient, but success is the fact that the best players will be playing in events in a schedule that works for the players and the audience.
Mark, agree?
FSG has a real sense of urgency here, and I think that's going to prove out.